Happy Halloween, everyone! I'm currently looking for a spooky story to read. Thanks. Wait, sure. It's Spooky Bats. I have a beanie that I've had for quite a long time that I've never worn. Why? Because it doesn't fit in my head. It's very small, but has little ghosts on it. It's kind of cute. It matches my bat shirt. All spooky. Ooh, music. I have a cold, so if I sound weird or if I sound stuffy or whatever, I've had a cold for like a week now. It apparently is not going away. It did not go away. And here I am. Oh, I forgot I had these things on. I was gonna put my hair up and then I didn't. Anyway, these spooky stories are like scary in a different type of way. It's scary in a humans are terrible people kind of a way. 100 true scary stories to read at bedtime. And it's all like someone tried to break into my house while I was alone, and I took a run down in the woods and I smelled a weird smell. Later I found out it was a dead body. And I like spooky in a spooky kind of way. So I might read. I have more bedtime story. Skull. And it says 40 creepy tales from around the world. These are cool, but they're a lot longer because it has a lot of setup, it's a lot of information. And then I have these spooky stories from human beings that sent their stories into a podcast, and the podcast wrote down their stories into a book. These stories are quite the spooktacular. So I might start with these types of spooky stories. Actually, I'm going to start with this one. Move the books away. I also start with this book cover. There we go. There we go. The podcast is called Scared to Death. I'm going to start with these because they're more... I like these stories better. I mean, granted, I haven't read all of the stories in the other two books, but these have a more unique, personal feel to them. And they're all normal human beings that just happen to listen to a specific podcast. Alright. Let's see how well I can read today. I like how I actually got scared by a sound from my computer. There was that high-pitched, like, ringing sound, and I was like, where's that coming from? And I looked around and I was like, oh wait, that's the music. I used to go ghost hunting with my family and their friends. We've done multiple places: Waverly Hills, multiple asylums, sanatoriums, jails, etc. But the one place that really stands out is Cincinnati Reformatory. This place has its history of violence. Priests that have raped children, the basement is known for a dogfighting ring, and many other things. But the one place that really got to me was the attic. I followed my mom and her co-workers and some of our neighbors to the attic, while some of the others went down to investigate the basement. As we trudged up there, I automatically didn't like the feel of the room. Something about it felt ominous, but I sat down next to my mother in a circle that they created with chairs. There was nothing up there but a table. and we sat the flashlights there for the test that we knew about, where the spirits would flip it on and off. So here I am, sitting, my back facing the wall, maybe like 2 feet away. The ground itself, cement, and we begin to ask questions. My mother's co-worker begins by asking if there's something here. Then we hear a gunshot. This is a sound This is the sound that has been said that you could hear through the night while nobody's out there. So he asks another question. Are you a demon? And if that was you, can you please make another sound? First off, I absolutely hated this question. I don't want to know if it is or not. Well, lo and behold, from behind me, there's a sound like claws scratching the ground, and it runs towards me. I quickly stand up, and my neighbor also doing the same, as she started crying at this point, and the flashlight flipped itself on to say yes. So immediately, I look at my mom and go, I'm done. Needless to say, that was the quickest I've ever gone down the steps. I wanted to leave the place and go home, but we couldn't leave since we had this place for the night and had no way of locking the door, so I refused to go into the attic again. Now jump ahead a couple of months after that. My parents and I are invited to go back for another tour by my mother's co-workers. I said absolutely not and refused to go, which I'm so glad I did. The owner of the place hated being alone in there while they had to clean, so they would leave little recorders around the house as they worked. The week before my family went, the owner said the hallway smelled like decay for a full week. The owner also proceeded to tell my mom that they heard a name getting called in the attic. When my mom asked what name, for curiosity's sake, the woman said something. They heard a name getting called in the attic. When my mom asked what name, just out of curiosity, the woman said that something was calling the name. Sarah. My name. After that experience, I cannot go ghost hunting, and I refuse to. Luckily, the owner shut down the place due to their own issues for taking over the place for personal matters, and so there's nobody who can do tours, but I'll never go near it, even if it was an option. Yo, I did really good for the first half, and then the second half, I was just stumbling. I don't know why. I try to read and knowing that I have such a hard time. Okay, hold on. Let's check how long this story is. Flip page. Okay, it's like 4 pages long. We're in for a story. I need to sum up a couple of things before I get into the story. To help you understand a little bit about me. I was born with a veil, which in my Indian heritage says that I have a sixth sense, or I can see, hear, and feel all the things that go bump in the night. All of my life, I have seen shadow people, and they see me. Although they have never really bothered me, I still see them everywhere. I can also feel the evil that exists in some places. I can walk into a room and know exactly where the entity is and how evil it is. I can feel it following me around the room. I can also walk past people and feel the horrible things that reside within them. And they know that I know, because they will turn around and give me such an evil smile. It makes my skin crawl. Anyway, several years ago, I started dating this guy. He told me that he had been into black magic, but had gotten away from it. He also said that he still had a footlocker with all of his books, black magic books, and Ouija board inside of it. I could feel it every single time he opened the footlocker. It was a horrible wait, an extremely violent nightmare. I knew something wasn't right about it, but didn't think anything of it since he had said that he had stopped practicing. We eventually moved in together. The house soon took a heavy weight. I saw more and more shadow people. I would hear bottles rolling on the floor of the kitchen, and upon inspecting, turns out there'd be nothing. I told him what I saw and felt, but he played it off like it was my imagination. He started drinking heavily and said it was due to stress. It got worse and worse. And when we would get into arguments, his eyes would turn from hazel to black. He would say horrible things to me, and then later couldn't understand why I was so mad at him. We soon decided to split, but since the lease was not up, I stayed in the spare room. I continued to see shadow people walking through the halls. But when we moved to separate rooms, things got even worse. I could hear him snoring in the other room, but I could also hear pacing outside of my bedroom door. There were several nights that I would wake up to my dog laying over me, staring at the door and growling. I could hear him growling in his sleep. It was a low growl, but I could still hear it. One night, I was sitting in the living room watching The Right. My ex was passed out on the couch, as he usually was. It got to the part where they were performing an exorcism. My boyfriend started growling. He made these horrible, guttural sounds. Then he started growling, "Turn it off. Turn it off." His face started contorting, and his chest started heaving upwards like he was being pulled up. All the while, he was still growling, "Turn it off." I sat there staring at him in disbelief, frozen with fear, but curiosity at the same time. So I turned up the volume and watched. He continued to growl and move, still passed out. After what seemed like an hour, he lifted his head and yelled, "Turn it off!" So I did. He got quiet and relaxed once I turned off the movie. I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I sat there staring at him for a minute, then got up and went to the room and locked the door. I called my friend the next day and told her what had happened. She rushed me to a medium that she saw regularly the next day. My friend was babbling away about the problems to the medium while I sat there quietly. The medium kept staring at me, staring with such curiosity. I finally said, "The fuck is wrong? What?" He said, "Let me see a picture of him." I hadn't even started to tell him my problems yet, so how could he know? I showed him a picture of my ex. He was happy and smiling in that picture, one of the few days we had happy together. The medium about fell over in his chair. He yelled at me. "He has something attached to him." "That's what I'm seeing. It's trying to hide itself. It's watching everything you do. It's reporting back to him. He also has several demons attached to him," he said. "This guy is drinking to try and block out all of the voices he's hearing. Get away from him," the medium said. "In the meantime, until you can move out and until you move out. Go and stage your home. My friend and I did just that. We spent 2 hours opening every single door and blowing the smoke into every single corner. I didn't tell my ex-boyfriend where I had been or that I had staged the house that day. As soon as he got home, he yelled, "What did you do? What did you do?" I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. He screamed, "You did something to this house. I can feel it." I just looked at him and told him he was crazy. That night, when I laid down, something came into my room while I was wide awake and kicked my bed hard, angrily and repeatedly. I sat up and walked into the living room where my ex was, and I told him. He just shrugged his shoulders and said I was the crazy one. He knew what I had done. I couldn't take it anymore and soon moved out, but there's still something lingering around me at all times. After a few years, I now have a new boyfriend. We recently moved in together. One morning, he sat up looking very confused and concerned and said, "I need to tell you something, but I don't know how to say it." I said, "Just spit it out." He stared at me with a look I have never seen on his face before. "Babe, I had a really bad dream last night. Something was trying to climb up my leg while you were sleeping. Something black, very bad and evil. I kept kicking it off of you, but it wouldn't let go, and it just kept climbing up. And then it got mad." I said, "Excuse me?" He said, It got really mad. It jumped on me and got in my face and screamed this horrible sound. I could even feel the coldness coming from its breath. It wanted you. Really, really bad. But I wouldn't let it take you." Frightened and feeling defeated, I said, "You're not supposed to feel coldness from dreams. Are you sure you were asleep?" He said, "I don't know, but I hope it was just a dream." I told him that I see black shadows outside our bedroom every night, that I'd never seen it come in. I also told him about my ex and the medium. He shrugged his shoulders and got up, still looking concerned. Now we go to sleep every night with him holding me tight. I don't know what this is and why it's still attached to me, but it still haunts me every night. I think I did a pretty good job reading that one. I only stumbled like twice. Also, that's really spooky. Imagine just like... I think every part of it is just really fucked. Between having a psycho ex-boyfriend like that. Jeez. I don't know, I would have stayed on my friend's couch instead of leasing that home with him. Like, having something like watching you, following you, and even climbing on you as you sleep. Nah, can't get me with that. I'd rather burn down the entire house. There ain't no reason to be playing around with no spooky whatever that is. Just drinking normal apple juice. If anyone was wondering, which they're not. Alright. I think this one's aliens. Which, I do have an alien onesie. And I was going to wear it. But seeing as this is a green screen, and the alien thing is also green, it kind of like saw through me. It was just every time there was a little alien on the shirt, it would just like, poof, you'd see the background. Boy, is my throat dry. We are only 30 minutes into reading spooky stories with your host, Auntie Vale. So I've been a police officer for about 3 years now. In order to become an officer, you must pass a physical test, multiple written tests, oral boards, attend a police academy, and pass a psychological evaluation, among other things. There's really only one psychologist in the area certified to conduct these psych evals, according to the state. Basically, the doctor asks you a bunch of questions about a myriad of things. I was going through the process to get my first law enforcement job, and I was at the psych eval stage when the psychologist asked me if I had trouble sleeping. I said, no, not really. Not any more than anyone else, I suppose. Although, I have had sleep paralysis before. You know, not being able to move and the shadow figure in the corner and all that. The doctor immediately sat back in his chair and said, "Really? Tell me a little more about that." I thought, great. I'm in a psych eval, and now I have to explain imaginary figures to the psychologist. This is going super well. So, I explained the incident to the doctor. But for this story, a little background. When I was a kid, I was always terrified of aliens. Probably because I watched Mel Gibson in Signs at way too young an age. I was terrified as I used to lay in the direct middle of my bed, completely still, until I fell asleep, and even then, I would have reoccurring nightmares. Sometimes in the nightmares, I would be kidnapped by a dark figure, dressed in all black, and I would scream, but nothing came out. Other times, I would see aliens and chase them, yelling for help, but no one would come. Fast forward to high school. I'm in my friend's basement, spending the night. Why did I turn my head so hard for no reason? My bad, sorry. I'm in my friend's basement, spending the night. We're watching an alien documentary where he says he has to take a leak, so he gets up and heads to the bathroom. The documentary begins talking about a book and how the cover of the book had been known to be extremely frightening to those who say they've experienced aliens. I was not prepared for the cover. When they showed the cover of the book, I was struck with so much fear and anxiety that I'd never felt like this ever before. I'd never seen the cover before, but I felt fear and panic rush over me. Like the drawing of the alien on the book was something looking directly at me. I actually got up and had to leave the room. I was that scared. I told my friend that I had to take a leak after him, and that's why I was waiting outside the bathroom door, not because I was scared to be alone with the picture on the screen. We slept in the basement that night. There were two couches at a 90-degree angle where we slept with our heads towards the meeting point. I was turned facing the wall, with the window leading outside. I was fast asleep, then suddenly awoke. For some reason, I felt that fear all over again, just like when I saw the book cover. I opened my eyes and locked on to a tall, slim, dark figure standing in the corner of the room next to the window. It was staring right at me. I couldn't make out a face, but I could feel it staring at me. I was terrified. Then I realized there was another at the end of the couch where my head was. I could feel it looking at me, staring at me. I felt so much terror that I felt I was going to die, like I was in real, serious danger. I was too scared to look up at the figure above my head. I just kept staring at the one in the corner, standing motionless. Then I began screaming my friend's name, but I couldn't make a sound. I tried harder and harder to yell for him to wake up. Slowly, my voice started at a whisper, got louder and louder until I was all out screaming for him to wake up. He woke up, and the figure was gone. I explained to him everything, the paralysis, the figures, how I was terrified. I'm not sure if he didn't believe me or was so tired that he didn't care, but he sat up, looked around, then went back to sleep. I did not sleep anymore that night. So after explaining this to the psychologist, he said, "Did you have any blood or scoop marks on your body that you noticed?" A little shocked by the obvious change in the line of questioning and the sudden interest in this topic, I said, no, not that I remember. Why? Is that normal with sleep paralysis? The doctor said, "Well, that's a story for another day." He then quickly moved on with the evaluation. Part of the evaluation is an online test that has hundreds of questions on it. He happened to have shitty internet and said he couldn't get it to work. He asked if it would be okay for me to come back and try again another day. It was the next day, or a few days later, that I went back in. As he was setting up the test, I brought up the fact that it was another day and I'd like to have that conversation now. He got quite serious and said, "Fine. What I'm going to show you has to stay between us. This does not leave the office." He left the room and came back with an identification card with his name on it that said MUFON UFO Investigator. It looked very official. He said that when I mentioned the shadow figures in the corner, it piqued his interest, and he may have wanted to investigate more. I wanted to ask about all the recurring dreams in the book cover, but remembered that I was trying to pass my evaluation to get a job here. So basically I kept it brief, expressed how I thought it was interesting, and left it at that. I ended up passing the evaluation, and have had sleep paralysis once since. Ooh, spooky, spooktacular. I used to hate aliens. Not just hate aliens, I used to be scared of aliens. I had such a fear of aliens when I was younger. That shit terrified me to my core. Like, no joke, I think my biggest fear as a kid was aliens. Now, not so much. I don't know what I'm scared of other than roaches. I'm really terrified of cockroaches, but you don't see spooky stories about like cockroaches abducting people. So I don't know what I'm scared of nowadays. Alright, let's give this book a rest and switch to a new book. We now live in an age where most people carry on their person at least one device capable of photographing or recording at any given incident. As a result, reports of encounters with monsters and cryptids have become not only less commonplace, but also far less believable. Of all of the alleged incidents that feature such entities, the only available evidence is often verbal testimony from those who were involved. And because actual proof is often lackluster or non-existent, it is almost routine for these experiences to be written off as campfire stories or urban legends. But what are we to believe when the incident is witnessed over a substantial period by multiple members of the same community? Point Pleasant, West Virginia is a small town with a big history. Its population is over 4,000. Its population of just over 4,000 occupies an area of just 3 square miles. One would not think of it as a city, but in fact it is. A city surrounded by lush green countrysides. Bisected by the vast Ohio River and steeped in larger-than-life legend. As its name suggests, its character is quaint, peaceful, and above all, pleasant. On the surface, at least, no one would ever suspect that it is the home of one of the most unsettling ordeals of the last half-century, one that still strikes fear into the hearts of many. During the latter half of 1960s, reports began to surface of a mysterious and horrifying creature stalking residents on the outskirts and surrounding areas of the town. Encounters with this entity were said to be so frightening that at least one person suffered psychological trauma for many years after the experience. The first sighting occurred the 12th of November, 1966, when 5 gravediggers working in a local cemetery near Clemendon saw what they thought was a human being flying out of a group of trees nearby. They watched for about a minute as it swooped low over their heads and then took off into the distance. 2 days later, on the 14th, a resident in Salem, Newell Partridge, that's a name, was at his house watching television when he saw 2 red objects hovering over a field at the rear of his property. Upon investigation, he realized that the glowing orbs were in fact a pair of eyes, which belonged to a tall, dark figure. This figure was standing on a branch of a tree about 100 meters distance when it promptly rose up into the air and flew away over the woods, letting out a blood-curdling screech as it went. His dog, a German Shepherd named Bandit, took off in pursuit and was never seen again. Oh dang, I did not see this notification. I saw the Instagram post, but not the Twitch notification. Twitch notifications, rarely work. I'll be honest. Twitch notifications are mad bullshit. Back to the Mothman. The following evening, on the 15th, 2 young married couples burst into the Mason County Sheriff's Office in a state of panic and distress. They were Mr. and Mrs. Roger Scarberry and Mr. and Mrs. Steve Mallet. They had been on their way back from a double date driving close to the TNT area of Point Pleasant when they saw a tall gray figure standing next to the road. They reported that it looked like a man, but much taller, possibly 7 feet or more. and that it appeared to have a pair of wings folded behind its back. In front of it lay the carcass of a dog, the breed of which was never determined, but later assumed it was Newell Partridge's German Shepherd. As they passed this strange-looking figure, it rose into the air and proceeded to fly over the car. Mr. Scarberry was driving, sped up nearly 100 miles per hour, but the creature was able to keep up, matching the speed of the vehicle. His wife said that it emitted a high-pitched screech as it flew, and it had huge red eyes, which glowed like a pair of car reflectors. As they entered the town, it broke off the chase and flew back into the direction of the TNT area. I'm going to a Halloween thing, but I'm waiting for my friends to pick me up because I have to drive downtown LA. Fuck that. Have fun in your You hate driving downtown LA. I like how I still read have, but I knew you meant hate. And which is why I said fuck that. I'm not a fan of driving in cities, which so why I can fuck that. But still, enjoy your Halloween party. I'm probably not going to be streaming too late because I'm an old person. I get tired very easily. It's like 100 degrees in this house as well. So I'm about to fight with that air conditioning unit in a few minutes. Where was I? A press conference was held on the afternoon of the 16th, where the Scarberrys and Mallet couple made their accounts of the previous evening. Dr. Robert Smith, a wildlife expert, was also in attendance and offered an explanation to the waiting media, saying that what this couple saw was actually just an abnormally large crane, which had been blown out of its migration route. These reports would hit the local evening paper on the 16th of November as the word of the encounter spread through the town like wildfire. This, as with many kind of sensationalism, unfortunately invites many fabricated sightings from other so-called eyewitnesses, and from here on out, nearly all of these alleged encounters were subjected to much higher scrutiny. That is not to say that all of them were frivolous, however. I'm so glad we're all carpooling. And if you get lit, you don't have to worry about driving back and dying. So that's good. Because Halloween roads are kind of ridiculous and like one of the high days for hospitals being full of people driving like idiots or getting intoxicated or having accidents so just be safe. Be safe. One sighting in particular occurred in the... Oh no, yeah, okay. I thought I had already read this. One sighting in particular occurred on the evening of the 16th. At around the same time, and let's try that again. One sighting in particular occurred on the evening of the 16th. At around the same time, the first evening papers were being deposited in the local mailbox. Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Walsme, along with Marcella Bennett and her baby daughter Tina, were on their way to visit the Thompson family, who lived on the outskirts of town. When they pulled up to the Thompson property, the car seemed to disrupt something. As they were getting out of the vehicle, they were shocked to see a large, gray figure, bigger than a man, rising from the ground nearby, which they described as having a terrible, glowing red eyes. Marcella was so alarmed that she forgot that she was carrying her baby daughter, and in her panic, dropped her. After collecting herself and her child, she ran to the Thomas house and was let in by one of their children. The creature shuffled after them and continued to terrorize the household by peering into the window. By the time the police arrived, over half an hour later, it had, of course, vanished. And that was not the last Marcella would see of the so-called Mothman at Point Pleasant. She just so happened to live on the outskirts of town, near the TNT area, and claimed that after her initial encounter at the Thompson residence, the creature had visited her home on several other occasions, and that she often heard the blood-curdling screech in the dead of night. Marcella apparently suffered from nightmares and other mental health issues for many years after her ordeal. It's supposed to be a mutual friends thing where he's going to DJ or something, and hopefully I'd rather meet someone that records music or something. What was the point of the wow? I think the wow should have been that this lady got so scared she was like, whoops, there's my baby, and she just threw it. Oh my god, I still have 2 more pages about this Mothman. Let's read Mothman. The TNT area of Point Pleasant would later become heavily associated with the Mothman. It is a large tract of land dotted with small cement igloo used during World War II to store ammunition. Yeah. Excuse me. That was a spooky at all. That was just a really nasty hiccup. World War II, ammunition. It's also adjacent to 2,500 acre McClintock Wildlife Station, and the entire landscape is covered with dense forests, steep hills, and riddled with tunnels. The press would go on to claim that the area provided a sort of home for the creature during the time there, with most of the sightings having occurred in this area. There were many more reported encounters towards the end of the 1966, peaking especially in 1967. During December of that year, the Silver River Bridge over the Ohio River collapsed, plunging a number of vehicles into the icy depths and killing 46 people in the process. Immediately after this, sightings of the Mothman ceased altogether, leading many to believe that the creature was somehow responsible for this tragedy, and that it was in fact a harbinger of death. So who, or rather what, was the Mothman? Was there any truth to the events that took place? Or was it just some elaborate hoax, orchestrated with the sole intention of increasing tourism of this failing backwoods town? That's the Mothman. Which is kind of creepy, well, we're being honest. Because I don't like bugs. Not a bug person. Bugs bother me. Bugs freak me out. So, if you're telling me a giant human-sized, well, larger than human-sized, 7-8 foot large insect man is flying at me in the middle of the night and is gonna steal my baby, maybe I would have been like the lady in the story and would have dropped the baby too. I don't know. That's kind of scary. Oh, we're moving on to my story. Ooh, didn't see that coming. I have a story? I was also haunted. It's a ghost story. I'm going to omit where I live. I wrote it down so I'd have an easier time remembering it. Andy Vale's haunting. We gotta start right at the beginning. Literally, since the day I moved into this house, things started slowly building up. I moved into this house about 2 years ago, and whatever it is didn't take its time showing up. The first thing that happened wasn't scary in a paranormal way, but annoying in a scary, normal, I don't want to get robbed kind of way. Constantly, I would walk to the kitchen and find the back door of the house wide open. I would close it, thinking it was nothing, and a few hours later, or a few days later, I'd find the door wide open again, even though I made sure to lock the door, push it in, hear the click, and once even placed a wedge in front of it. But somehow I would walk by and notice the door was open again. It would happen in the morning, in the middle of the day, and in the middle of the night. The door would be wide open, just randomly. Instead of thinking anything supernatural, I had this fear that someone could just walk into my home at any time. And just, I don't know, rob me. But I also had this inkling in the back of my head, remembering that traditionally, when you move into a house, you have to bless it. I asked my aunt for a little help. My aunt brought me some holy water and a booklet, and I blessed the house. After the blessing, a month went by without anything happening. No doors opening, no nothing. It just stopped. And at a certain point, I even forgot all about it. The house became so calm and quiet, just like I like it. More or less 6 months back. And without any, more or less 6 months back, nothing happened. But it wouldn't be a story if it all ended there. After the month of quiet, I noticed I would hear the sound of the door opening. The door makes this unmistakable, loud noise, and the back door makes a click. I heard the sound of both doors opening, and I checked. The doors were closed, and no one else was home. It was off-putting, but nothing to worry about. Then, slowly I heard more things throughout the day. Some soft banging, which I would blame on my neighbors, and the sound of walking, which I would also say was just the neighbors being loud on their side. You know, thin walls, sound transfers, which turns out not to be the case. Then, scary things occurred. It was late at night when it all happened. I was sitting down at my computer when all of a sudden I heard the front door violently shake, as if someone was trying to get in. So I raced over, and when I got to the door, it stopped. I looked out the hole, and no one was there. Then the back door began to jiggle. It's a door with glass panes. It's a door with glass panels in the middle. I walked over to the door and looked through the window, cautiously. But again, when I got to the door, it stopped, and there was no one there. I thought to myself, well, that's weird, and just sat down on my desk. Boom! The back door started shaking again. Now the back door and the front door. First, I turned on all the lights. Then I ran over to the door, and as I was getting to it, it stopped. When I looked in, no one was there. And then I got this, scared feeling, and I decided to search the entire house. Every room in the house had to be checked. The bedrooms, the laundry room, the crawl spaces, I lit up this house like a Christmas tree. Turn on every light. Good things we don't pay electricity here. There was no one there. And there was no sound. But when I checked the doors, there was nothing. I went back to my room, and the shaking started again. I ran to the kitchen and I grabbed a knife. After going to the bedroom, I barricaded the door. I put the knife on my nightstand. I'll tell you, the next morning, I ran to Walmart, bought security cams. Got cameras, alarms. If someone is gonna try and open that door, I'm gonna see him now. If the door opens, I'm gonna see him. I'm gonna hear it, and I'm gonna call the cops. But I also was still kind of scared. So I went around, blessed the house again. Peace in my house returned. But only for a few months. Maybe like 6 months again. So my parents came to visit for Thanksgiving and were staying over for a while. They also got a nice scare. And they both got it on the same day. My parents were watching TV in their room, and I was already sleeping in my room. Both my parents heard the door open, but it couldn't have been my husband because he was scheduled to work until 8 a.m., and he wouldn't be coming home in the middle of the night. My dad stood up and checked the front door. He pushed the door in again, unlocked it, locked it, just to make sure it's all working. But at that moment, my mom also kind of had to use the bathroom, so she went off. And my dad went back to their room. While she was there, though, the door slowly opened. My mother saw the door handle turn. Thinking it was my dad, she called out to him. "Ba, ba, ba, ba." It wasn't my dad. She froze up for a second and then just ran back to the room. It was weird. Now everyone thinks my house is haunted. But for me, nothing big has happened since then. Until just a few weeks ago, I was walking out of the bathroom when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a tall, black figure standing in my way. I didn't want it to know I was scared. So I didn't even break stride. I walked straight through it. I closed the door, I lied down, and boy, did I do some heavy breathing. I was just hyperventilating. That's the end of that story. That's the end of how I wrote it, but that's not actually the end of that story. That's the end of what I wrote. The actual ending of this story is that I kept hearing and feeling people walking around the house. And one day, my neighbor comes over and rings the doorbell. I've never talked to my neighbors. I'm very antisocial and I don't talk to other human beings very often. It's how I am. My neighbor comes over and she's like not sure how to start the conversation. And she just kind of says, "If you guys smell smoke, don't call the fire department." It's like, what? If you smell smoke, don't call the fire department. I'm not sure how thin our walls are and if our vent systems are connected. But I'm going to start smudging my house. So if you smell smoke, don't call the fire department. And I know what smudging is. I have read my share of scary stories to know what a smudging is. And I asked her, why are you smudging the house? Anything particular going on? And she's like, "I swear I'm not crazy. I swear I'm not crazy. But ever since we moved here, I feel like someone's in the house. I feel something in the house. And I feel like I can see something out of the corner of my eye. But when I look, it's not there anymore." And I just kind of sat there, like, twiddling my fingers, like, "Oh, really?" And she's like, "Yeah, I I don't know what it is and what's going on. So, I'm gonna try and cleanse the house. I look at her and I'm like, you're not crazy. I'm also going through some things in this house, and I have no idea what it is. So, I talked to my aunt, and she talks to a priest. And the priest says that he'll come over and bless the house. And I go over to my neighbor and I knock on her door. I'm like, hey, we're gonna have a priest come bless our house. If you're into it, he can come over and bless your house too. Because we live in a duplex. It's just it's one big building. Just split down the middle. And I was like, if you want, he can come over to your side of the house and bless it. She's like, oh my god, yes, anything, please. So, priest comes over, blesses the house. Apparently he saw sin on my face because the man drenched me in holy water. I was drowning. He took like a gallon of holy water and went whoosh. I was soaking. Then he does the blessing. He goes over to her house. No, he asks me what's going on in my house. I tell him. Then he goes over to her house. He does the same thing. He throws a gallon of holy water at me again for a second time. Apparently, I have the face of sin. I don't know what it is. But, he threw more holy water at me. And he asked her what was going on in her house. And she describes the things that she was seeing, the things that she was feeling. And I was like, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. This sounds just familiar. This sounds like I know what she's feeling right now. He blessed the house. And it's been over 6 months. No doors opening. No creaking sounds. No one shaking my doors. I don't hear anyone walking up and down. So, I think we're good. That's the end of my ghost story. I've been here for an hour and a half. Welcome? I'm not sure what you want me to say. Oh, I've been here for half an hour. My bad. An hour and a half. I was like, I haven't even been streaming for an hour and a half. I've been streaming for an hour and 12. I think 11 of those minutes I was in the title screen trying to figure out what book I was going to read. The answer was, I think, all of them. No, I didn't read this one. This one is less spooky, more true crime? Spooky in its own right, but not Halloween themed. What time is it? 9:30. It's still so early and I'm exhausted. We need more of those real life spooky stories. Speaking of, I have real life spooky stories that have happened to me. I have a whole page of spooky stories that happened to me in my childhood. The weird thing is that I wrote these like a book, as if I'm not fucking reading it. But I really did write these like it's a book. This spooky story, which one is this one? Yeah, okay. This one I think is the most scary story I've lived. Only because it was super fucked up. I was really young. And it was, I think, the first time anything spooky had ever happened to me. So, let's get into this. And as I am such a great writer, here we go. I'll start by giving a little background information. In my family, the majority of us have the ability to see things, but not everyone. I always thought it was in my mind, it was just playing tricks on me when I was a kid. Nothing big ever happened to me, like everyone else in my family. Parentheses. A lot of my family, extended family, immediate family, have seen and had a lot of shit happen to them. Me, nothing at this point. On parentheses. My middle brother can't see or hear weird things. But this night, he noticed he could feel things. This happened when I was about middle school, elementary or middle school. My brother came into my room and told me he had this weird feeling. He didn't know how to explain it, but he had this weird feeling. But it would make him feel better if I could go sleep in his room this night. He had bunk beds, and I didn't have a problem with this. So I climbed up in the top bunk, just curled up to sleep. But at some point in the middle of the night, I woke up. The room felt frigid cold. And even though this room had felt so much hotter when there's more than one person in this room, I tossed and turned. In different positions, I just couldn't get to sleep. I was facing away from the wall. And that's when I shifted. And I saw it. It was just hanging there. Hanging there by his neck. There, in the middle of the room, was a man. Hanging by a rope. His skin was white and pale. Ashy. I was transfixed. I laid there, staring at it for a few seconds. And that's when I saw it move. It started to move its head up to look at me. His eyes were hollowed out, as if something had scratched them out. I was terrified to my very core. I began to kick the bed and shake like a madwoman. The creaking of the bed went back and forth, just trying to wake up my brother. He kept snoring over the loud metallic creaks. I became frantic, kicked even more, and yet he still continued to snore. I told myself, this isn't real, this isn't real. I have to stop looking at it. If I stop looking at it, it will go away. It's not real. I turned back over and I faced the wall. But I knew it was still there. I could almost feel its hollow eyes piercing into me. The air in the room shifted, got even colder still. I felt it. It now stood behind me. I started shaking even harder. Maybe if my brother woke up, he could help me. Suddenly, I felt hands on my back. I could feel the bones in his finger. Then it slowly moved up my back to my neck. I was so terrified. I mumbled out a yelp, and I passed out. That's the end of that story. This is true. I got so scared I passed out. I blacked out completely. Like, I woke up the next morning so frightened. I yelled at my brother. I got so mad, I yelled at my brother and was like, if you ever feel that feeling again, I swear I'm never coming over here again. You did this to me. It was your fault. Your dumb feelings. If you're scared, you better keep it to yourself. I was so mad. I have never been so scared in my entire life. It's the scariest thing I have ever been a part of. Boy, did that suck. Alright, you know what? I'm gonna skip one of mine and read one of the books. I guess this one. Mail. I use mail as bookmarks. Wow, it's really short. I used to wake up with a voicemail on my phone every morning. I never heard the call come through, and I never saw any evidence of it on my call logs. But this happened every night for a few months. The message was almost the most horrific sounding static, screaming, gargling noises, animalistic crying sounds. And then someone would say, "See you soon." I had no idea what this could be and how I was getting these voicemails. I assumed it was some kids playing a joke on me or something. It freaked me out enough that I had to get a new phone number. The morning after, I woke up and checked my voicemail, and I felt a huge sigh of relief when I saw there was no message. I went to work and checked the voicemail on my work phone. Like I always do, I heard the same noises I've been hearing on my phone. This time the voice said, "I'm always here." Yo, that was short, but spooky. That's creepy. Absolutely creepy. How often is always? Yep, even then. Always. I would have such... I don't know what I would do. I definitely would have to stop using a cell phone. Because that shit's not okay. Let's see. Campground horror. Must be good, right? My girlfriend and I were at a normal pay campground in my area. It never felt spooky because we weren't out in the woods or anything. The campsites were very close together, and there were typically at least a few groups within shouting distance. This was in early October, so we thought we'd get in one more weekend away for the year before it got too cold. When we arrived, we checked in, picked out our campsite. The worker told us there are a few families around, but we were lucky because only one person had checked in the area by us. We drive to the site and get set up, get a fire going, and we're having a nice night, enjoying a few beers, relaxing by the fire. Then we see our neighbors returning to their campsite. In the dark, we could see the outline of a big guy making a fire and tinkering around with his stuff. He's about 20 yards away. We can hear him mumbling to himself. We don't think much of him until we go to bed a few hours later, and we can still hear him talking to himself. Only it's louder now. He's talking about people disrespecting him and how those people don't know what's good for them. At this point, we get a little freaked out because we also notice that his voice is getting louder and it seems to be closer to our tent. We don't sleep, we just listen to him. Eventually, we hear him spell out R-U-S. and over and over, and we quickly decide we need to leave. We had a whispered conversation, and we decided we were going to leave the tent and all of our stuff quietly and walk in the dark to our car before unlocking it. Then quickly drive away. Plan worked. We drive an hour home and return in the morning to pack up our tents. I was relieved when I saw that it was still there and the guy was nowhere in sight. I half expected him to trash our campsite. When we talked to the campground worker on our way out, I found out that after we left, the guy had started wandering around the entire campground, screaming about how he wanted to stab someone. The families felt terrorized, and eventually the cops came and hurled the guy away. Yep. That's how I get the fuck out of there. That's one of those, like, horror movie tropes where you stick around and you get killed. No. You get in your car, put in the key, and you drive the fuck away. Ain't no one got time to be murdered by some psychopaths. They got a screw loose, and they ain't gonna find that screw in you. Alright. Story number I don't know. I should probably edit this video. I don't know. Might put it on YouTube. Probably not. Let's be honest. Probably not. Alright. I see you. In college, I worked at our campus library, and I'd often be the one to shut it. See, this is why I can't upload it, because I'm so bad at reading. Literally the first sentence, no periods. Already messed up. Say that again. In college, I worked at our campus library, and I'd often be the one to shut it down at midnight, or I'd have to go around and clean work tables of everything students had left behind, and leave any books that needed to be put away stacked neatly on a cart for the morning workers. It was pretty creepy being in there alone at night, but in a way, it felt pretty safe, since the campus was enclosed and you had to go through the security checkpoint to get in after dark. One night, I was there alone, shutting everything down, and I just had this creepy feeling that someone was watching me. I felt I was alone because before anyone is... Why am I so bad at this? I knew I was alone because before anyone is left alone, whoever else is working at night locks the door and does a check to make sure no stragglers are still in the building. Then the closer cleans up, locks the doors again from the outside. This night, everywhere I went felt... God, why is this so hard to read? I did so well. Well, this night, everywhere I went, I kept looking around. I was sure that someone was there, following me. Finally, I finished everything up and went to clock out when I noticed one of the staff computer near the front door was lit up as if someone had recently used it. I went over and I looked at the monitor and saw a Word document pulled up, that followed everything I'd been doing since the worker had left earlier in the night. It read something like, 12 o'clock, alone, I see you. 12:05, study group room, I see you. 1207. Stacks. I see you. 1211. Media Center. I see you. 1215. Reference table. I see you. The scariest part was that I looked over at the door. It was still locked, meaning whoever typed this was still in the library with me. I left my stuff where it was and left immediately. Locked the door from the outside. By the time I got to the other building, I got campus security and went back to the library. The door was unlocked again, and whoever was there had left. I guess that is a fear that I have. If someone fucking... I see you. I don't like the feeling of being watched. I don't like looking into people's eyes. I don't like watching people. I see you. That would freak me out. Not gonna lie, that sucks. Cabinets. Against my better judgment, I played on a Ouija board with a friend one night when he brought the board over to my house for fun. Nothing too scary happened that night, though I had a bad feeling the whole time we were playing. The next afternoon, I had my family over, and it was a nice day, so we were all grilling outside, eating at a picnic table in the backyard. After we all sat down, I realized I forgot to bring out the salt and pepper shakers, so I go back inside and freeze. Every single one of my more than 20 cabinets, cupboards, and drawers in my kitchen were wide open. Every person who was over was outside and accounted for. No one had been in the house since I brought out the pitchers of water about 10 minutes earlier. Luckily, nothing creepy has happened in my house since then, but I consider it a warning to never mess around with the Ouija board. I ain't playing with no Ouija board. You can't catch me with that. No siree. Don't care if it's real, don't care if it's fake. I ain't playing around. It's like one of those things where you don't play around with knives. It's like, oh, you could be like really good at knives, but if you slice yourself, you're dead. I mean, that's not a good analogy, but my point is, I ain't fuck around with no Ouija boards. That's the point. The overarching point is I'm not gonna fuck around with the Ouija board. Don't care if it's true, don't care if it's fake. I'm not gonna dick around and find out. I am parched. Fuck around with one Phasma. I would. Actually, I don't think I do use the one in Phasmo. I'll use the spirit box, but I won't use the Ouija board in Phasmophobia. I don't want it around. Exactly. I don't want it around me anywhere. That shit's the devil. That can go away. I don't need that. I don't want people playing around it, or playing with it while I'm around. You guys can go play it in your house, in your basements. I don't know. Not with me. Not around me. I'm good. Like, I don't have to, test if this shit's gonna happen. I don't want it to just, I don't want to do that shit. I want to play around with no shit. There's, some things in life that are better I was gonna say unsaid, but I don't think that's right. Better undone. Better not messed with. Taking a picture of something on my phone, and all you see is my top of my phone. Oh boy. I would mess around with. I read that the first time, and in my head, instantly, not Dragon Balls as in like the anime with the little orbs and you prey on them and whatever, but I was like a dragon's ball. So I'm like, why would you say that? Like my brain just like, why would you do this? Let's see. I have a friend that knew a chick that was a palm reader, and she wanted to read mine, and I was like, hell the fuck nah. Hell fucking no, bitch. Don't touch me, I'm good. You know what? I think I'd be the same way. I have like a crazy second aunt, I think? A cousin of my mother's, who used to go to a palm reader and a fortune teller like every fucking week. Like every week she was at that place. I was like, one, the bitch fake as fuck. First of all, it's fake as fuck. Two, don't do that. Stop. Don't do that. Next. I was installing one of those voice typing programs into my grandfather's computer so that he could send emails and use the internet without having to type with his hands, which neither of them could do. I had turned on the microphone to capture what I was saying and test the software out, but it was also messing around with the phone, waiting for it to load, when I noticed it had registered a voice command even though I hadn't said anything yet. I watched in horror as the words appeared on the screen, prompted by something I couldn't hear. I've been waiting for you. That was short, sweet, and to the point. I've been waiting for you. Keep waiting. Well, this one's probably stalkery. He probably thought I was alone. My family has a cabin up north that's outside of a small town. It's on a lake where there aren't a lot of other properties and roads, from gravel to just dirt. No one goes on that last stretch unless you specifically know where my family's cabin is, because there's nothing else in that area. Well, one weekend, I had to work at my retail job until close to Friday. Well, one weekend, I had to work at my retail job until close on Friday. But I really wanted to go up and enjoy the rest of the weekend with my family, so I sit out late, knowing I wasn't going to get there until 3 a.m. At the end of the driving, on the 2-lane highway to the small town, I noticed a large truck with the KC lights had been following me for some time, but I didn't think much of it. I just figured that they were going to the same small town. However, when I passed the town and turned onto the gravel road, they continued following me, which started to freak me out. I was alone, out of cell range, in the middle of nowhere. If something happened, my family wouldn't notice. I hadn't made it until morning. As I started approaching the turn, I'd have to make before the gravel road to the dirt one. I started questioning what I should do. If this person was following me, turning on the dirt road would show them where I lived, but continuing on the gravel road would just go further into nothingness. Finally, I decided that going to the cabin was the best bet, because at least there were other people there. As I approached, I started flashing my high beams and honking my horn. The lights in the cabin turned on, and I saw my dad step onto the front porch. I pulled up as far as I could and ran into the house. The truck sat there for a minute with the lights aimed directly at us before it reversed back down. My dad and I spent a sleepless night in the living room, watching and listening for signs of anyone coming back. These stories are spooky in a very human way. Just fucking, why are humans such bad people? Why are humans such bad people? People are scarier than monsters. That sounded real stupid, but very Scooby-Doo. Alright. In mid-February of 2008, I embarked on a road trip from Tacoma area to Fort Campbell. Okay, Tacoma, Washington to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, with my friend Grant. He had joined the service and would be stationed there for the next 4 years at least. We stopped off the Oregon coast on the first night to visit some of his family, and then began the journey south. This winter was incredibly cold, and we didn't want a chance of going over the mountain pass in the northern states. We entered California in the darkness, taking turns driving and sleeping along the way so that we were both well rested and looking forward to the sunrise view over the Shasta mountain pass. Grant was driving through the -10 Fahrenheit pass. I distinctly remember this as the digital display on the center console was steady on this number for what felt like hours through the climb through the desolation. It was kind of cold where a smoker, me, would snuff out their cigarettes halfway through to stop the sting of the frigid, rushing air whistling through the slightly cracked window. We were a great distance from the last structure we had seen, and noticed a great drop in temperature. The readout suddenly read -15 Fahrenheit. The blasting heater of the small SUV was no match for the cold piercing through the window anymore. Smoking was clearly out of the question unless I wanted to spend it defending my decision to my freezing comrade. The frozen wasteland was clear, and the darkness of the night was burned away by the upcoming sunrise. Simultaneously, we both spotted something very peculiar on the roadside. Mind you, we were in the middle of nowhere. An exposure to the elements this far out from any direction would be either suicide mission or some kind of insane, eccentric hiker. There were no signs of life other than the three fires that we were staring at in amazement. Grant broke the silence with, "Are you seeing this?" I confirmed nervously, "Yeah, what the fuck?" We slowed and pulled off the road to the center fire. We bundled up in a layer of sweaters and coats and exited, leaving the car running. My immediate response was that these fires were a signal and that someone was in trouble. A quaint attempt to rationalize three separately, seemingly identical fires in no man's land? Again, no signs of life other than the fires. No cars or even tire tracks and this thin layer of snow. It just snowed and there was no sign of any tracks. It's impossible. We were alone, surrounded by silence, only to be broken by the faint crackling of the small fires and a running car engine. Although it felt like someone or something was there, watching us. A fear permeated the air, and the cold seeped into our bones, despite the heavy layer of clothes. Inspecting the fire, they were on a smaller scale, 5 to 6 split sections of logs, all tilted together in a teepee fashion, all spouting roughly a 24-inch flame. All fires were about 20 feet apart, evenly spaced, surrounded by untouched snow, and 8 to 10 feet off the road. The wood was not burned at the base near the snow. There was no footprints or tire tracks leading to or away from the site. We called out in the empty forest surrounding us, which yielded no response. I called to my friend. I don't feel right about this. We have to leave. Now. Feeling unnerved, without conclusion, we hastily piled into the safety of our running vehicle while making feeble attempts to explain what we had just experienced. My friend and I reluctantly concluded that there was no explanation for this, and we both felt that we felt eyes of someone or something. Before proceeding to our planned path, we surveyed a half-mile in each direction, methodically searching for a fellow traveler throughout the frigid cold in need of help, or something to explain what was taking place. Once we passed the fires, while conducting the search of the opposite direction of our travels, they were all extinguished. Nothing remained but charred sticks of firewood, not even completely burned, but dead due to the frigid environment encompassing them. We were silent until Reno, trying to erase the memory of the things we cannot explain. We spoke briefly, but it was when we were once again in Kentucky, but quickly realized it was best to keep quiet from avoid the relentless criticism to follow. Grant and I never spoke again. It was very random. That was weird. They're driving alone in the middle of the tundra when they see 3 fires started off in the distance. They go over to the fire. There are no trails. There are no people walking by. No footprints. No tire tracks. Nothing. Gotta say, pretty spooktacular. In a not paranormal way, but what would you think if you went across that? It's like one of those things where what would it be? You don't know what it is. You don't know who it was. But it had to be something. It had to be someone. Someone had to do it. As a young boy, being decades younger than my siblings, I grew up in a very large 5-bedroom home with just my parents. Both my room and my parents' room were located on the 2nd floor of our house, but on the opposite side, divided by a long stairwell leading to the 1st floor. As a child, and still to this day, I was captivated by scary stories and horror movies. This is particularly why, when the horror became real in my life, no one believed me, and when I began to beg for help, I first started to realize that something wasn't right as I tried to maneuver through the large and dark house, just like anyone would be scared of what could be in the dark room. I often tried to run through the dark as fast as I could to get back to the light or a safe place. As I did my usual run of terror, I began to notice unusual cold spots throughout the house. My parents were very conservative and strict, and the AC was not to be used unless it was very hot outside. So when I tried to rationalize the cold spot in my house, my first thought was that it must just be where the cold air was coming out of the vents. Curiosity and false bravado began to get the best of my little 9-year-old self, and I began to test my hypothesis. I ventured through the house, feeling for cold spots, and as I moved slowly, I began to realize that the places that were cold and were only in the dark, only at night, and only were places there was no AC vents to be seen. I began to think and worry more and more about what could be causing this. And that's when the nightmares began to take shape. As I left or entered a room throughout the house, if I was alone, I could almost count to 3 and guarantee that a door would slam behind me. No matter how much I pleaded innocence, both my parents were certain that it was me slamming the doors, until they saw it for themselves. When you're 9 and you can't be in a room without the door slamming on its own, your parents don't believe what you're saying, and you begin to feel hopeless very quickly. On the first floor of our house, I had a playroom that was located between 2 doors that led to the garage and the kitchen. One night, I was in the playroom playing with my action figures and dinosaurs, all arranged in a circle around me in the middle of the room. Behind me was a closet with more toys. The door open and the light on. As I sat there playing, I could hear my mother on the phone in the kitchen, probably 30 feet from where I sat. The closet light flickered, and the light switched off. Now, when I say that the light switched off, I don't mean that the light went out. I mean the light flipped to the off position on its own. Not 1 second after I noticed the sound of the light flip, the light going out, I turned to look at the direction, and the door slammed. It slammed so hard. I knew it would only be a few seconds before I was going to get in trouble again for slamming doors. I turned to the sound of my mom yelling at me from the kitchen and coming in my direction, and the light of the playroom switched off too. I could hear my mom was only steps away from my door, and the light switched back on. But it wasn't my mom that switched the light. I looked towards the door to where my mom was coming from the kitchen, and suddenly realized the circle of toys that had been positioned around me was thrown all around the room, and was no longer in a nice little circle that I had made. That's when the door of the garage began to open and slam on its own, along with the closet door, and the door to the kitchen slammed closed so my mom could not get in. Now I'm terrified because doors are slamming on its own, and the lights were beginning to flip on and off on their own. This went on for about 10 seconds, but to me it felt like 10 hours. Finally, the door stopped moving, and my mom stopped beating on the door and screaming because it finally opened to let her in. And when she came in the room, instead of having the look of anger on her face, she seemed confused as she realized I was cowered in the middle of the room crying. I could not have been slamming the doors, and I could not have locked her out on my own. That was the first incident I had with the entity in my home, but it was not the last. A few nights later, as I laid in my bed, obviously still worried it would come back, it did. I can't say what time it was because I had no clock in my room, but I had laid in my bed for a long time, unable to sleep. It began again, the lights flipping on, and my closet's lights following. Next, my closet door slammed and my bedroom slammed. My fan was on to keep my room cool for the night, and I was looking up at it when it stopped abruptly. It didn't slow to a stop. It stopped on a dime, and then immediately began to spin the opposite direction in an abnormal speed. The door began to open and slam as the lights in my room went on and off and the fan began to smoke. This is when my mom entered the room and saw what was happening. I could see the fear on her face, as I'm sure she could see the fear on mine. This is when my fan, that was spinning like a jet engine, caught on fire above me. My mom immediately ran and jumped on my bed, seemingly ignoring the chaos in the room in an attempt to save me. With her bare hand, she reached into the fiery fan blades, grabbing a hold of the burning fan and ripped it out of the ceiling. She threw the fan on the floor, ripped my bed sheets off of me, and smothered the fire until it stopped. As the fire stopped, so did the doors and lights. Then she proceeded to take me to her bedroom for the night. As I sat on her bed, she began to tell me what was happening. She painted a picture for me of how she knew what was happening and who was doing it. She said that when my older sisters were younger, similar occurrences happened to them. Slamming doors, lights flipping on and off, dolls and toys moving on their own. She told me that the only way to stop the entity was to talk to it. She told me that the spirits in our house was a young girl called Amy, and Amy had terrorized my family for quite a while. She told me that if Amy was bothering me, I had to tell her to stop, not ask her or ignore her, because it only made her mad. From this point on, when strange things began to happen around me in my house, I would tell Amy to stop, and that this wasn't her house anymore, and the terror would cease. Living with Amy became natural. I could simply just write it off the paranormal that happened to me. My mom was free to speak to Amy now because she no longer had to hide it from me in an attempt to keep me unaware. It didn't take long before I had an opportunity to talk to my sisters about Amy, and lo and behold, Amy had actually pushed one of my sisters down the stairs and broke her arm. The crazy part isn't that she was pushed, but that my mom actually saw her get pushed by Amy. In an attempt to control Amy, my mom spoke to her spirit, pleading her to leave my sister alone. She placed magnetic letters on the fridge to try to communicate with Amy, but the only thing that Amy ever wrote with letters was the name Amy. Eventually we left that house, moved to another one, and in the new house we never experienced Amy's presence again. That was like the perfect ending, and so we never had problems again.